Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay, this is probably the easiest session for me to teach, the one that is most effective, in terms of affecting, not effecting, people who are not Jewish, especially. We're not born Jewish, and is really in many ways the easiest thing to do. We've gone through very clearly now, right? We've talked about the Tanakh. We talked about Torah. And we talked about Nevi'im, right? Now we get to the third part. Ketuvim, meaning writings. The most shared part of the Bible, the most read pieces of the Bible are actually in Ketuvim. The order that it originally was originally written in, and originally codified into the Bible is not the order we view it today. Today, if we look in our Tanakh, we see that the order of the Ketuvim is a little weird. It's Psalms, Proverbs, Job, Song of Songs, and Ruth. So 5 books that are associated with holidays. It's Psalms, Proverbs, Job, which are the 3 books of poetry. Then Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther, which are associated with holidays. So we read Song of Songs at Passover, we read Ruth at Shavuos, we read Lamentations at Tisha B'Av, we read Ecclesiastes, Kohelet at Sukkot, and we read Esther coming up for Purim. And then other writings. And if you talk to a biblical scholar, that is how they will tell you it is organized. That is the way it's been organized since roughly the 7th or 8th century. But when they codified the Bible in Talmudic times, this is not the original order, okay? But this is the order we use it today. And it kind of doesn't make sense because it seems like they're 3 different sections totally unrelated to each other. Psalms is written by King David. Proverbs, Song of Songs, and Ecclesiastes are written by King Solomon. And they're all just sort of mishmash together as writings. In the Christian Bible, in the Christian scriptures, these come before the prophets. Okay? So when someone says the New Testament, we call it Christian scriptures, and they say their Old Testament is the same as our Tanakh, it is not. They changed the order because they wanted the prophecies to Jesus to be leading up, the last part of the Hebrew scriptures leading up to Jesus. We put writings in the middle. In our case, we put writings at the end because it's the prophecies, the rebuilding of the temple, and as we start to rebuild the temple with Ezra and Nehemiah. In the Talmud, it says very specifically that there is a thread that ties them together, but it doesn't say what the thread is.
It ties
all the books together.
All the books.
There's a Targum. They says that
in
there's
the Ketuvim.
In the Ketuvim.
Okay.
But it doesn't say what it is. Okay. In teaching at Loyola Marymount, I found a thread. I'm not saying it's the thread. I'm saying I found a thread. And I taught it that way. And students could read a verse from any book they had not studied and tell you what book it was from. So then I talked to friends who were rabbis and scholars and ministers and priests, and they said, we've never heard of this, and this really works, and you should publish it. I went to one publisher, and they actually made the deal on it. It was a Catholic publisher. And so you have this book, Sacred Relationships, which is a commentary on all of these and the theme that ties them together. So this is a very different way of teaching this section than you would have normally. This is still available, even though it's 10 years old. So what is it that ties them? I believe ties them together. And again, it's talked about in Talmud, but it doesn't say what it is. If you want to just toss that or slide that to Orlando, etc. So each of these books are books to experience. It's a how-to manual. It's a self-help manual on how to experience God in different types of relationships. The reality is that we get involved in whatever we're getting involved with as parents, as students, as children, as colleagues, in the work environment, in pain and suffering, whatever different relationships in our world. And we lose track of the fact that God is part of the equation. It's the beautiful story of the 10-year-old who goes to college and says, the other students say, well, if you're so smart, tell us where God, I'll give you $1 if you tell me where God is. He says, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you $10 if you can tell me where God isn't. But how much of our lives do we spend oblivious to the reality that God is integral in every moment of our lives?
Most.
That's what these books are for, I believe. Okay? And they actually are, in many ways, they are the original order. If I can borrow that again, if you can toss that over here, is actually written based upon the psychological development of the human being. Okay, and that's how we're going to study it, is based on the original order, based on it, which goes through the psycho-emotional development of a human being. Not this order, but the original order.
What was the original order?
I'm going to go through it right.
Oh.
The original order is, we'll go right through it. It's Ruth, Psalms, Job. There's songs in there. Ruth, Song, Job, Psalms, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Lamentations, Daniel, Esther, Ezra, Nehemiah, Chronicles. So we're going to go through what these books are and each type of relationship. Okay. So none of us are small children anymore, although I'm told I act childlike at times. There's a fine line between childish and childlike, and I cross it all too often, but that there is there. And so we're going to go through what these books are. Okay. And I won't need this. I can do it if I need to. And it's really important. So what is Ruth? Ruth is this story about, it opens up. Well, actually, I'll do it this way. So
Ruth does appear in the Christian Bible.
All of these appear in the Christian Bible.
Prior to prophets.
All of these appear prior to prophets, exactly. So Ruth begins in a time, let's see if I quote it in here, make it easy. Ruth begins in a time where it's a relationship between Ruth and Naomi. Okay, so Naomi has 2 sons, and they each marry 2 women who are not Jewish. Okay, or but Ruth, and her sons die. And so one of the daughter-in-laws says, "Okay, see you, Mom." She says, "Look, there's nothing I can do for you. I'm a widow. I'm a single mother. I'm a widow. I'm an old woman. I'm not going to have more sons that you can marry. Just go. And you're widows. You go find another husband." And one of them says, "Okay, fine." And the other is named Ruth. And Ruth is her daughter-in-law. And Ruth says, "No. Whither thou goest, I will go. Whither thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people. Thy God, my God." It's the first words of conversion.
So Ruth was not a Jewish girl.
And she converts.
Who was the mother?
Naomi's mother-in-law.
Naomi's mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law. So you have Naomi. She has 2 sons. Those 2 sons marry 2 girls. One goes off, and Ruth says, "No, I'm going to stay with you." And it becomes the relationship of a mother and a daughter, of a mentor and a mentee. She's not really the mother. She's the mother-in-law. Okay. And so Ruth becomes all about the relationship with, I might as well write it here. Just like bumped into someone. I just bumped into her. What is this? Prize for the Natasha room? Oh no, it's never mind. I got it. I'm just gonna kick it out of the way. Don't worry about it. So Ruth is all about Ruth becomes about the parent-child, mentor-mentee. And ultimately, Naomi will guide Ruth to find her husband, to get married. Ruth will do exactly what Naomi says, and Naomi will ultimately guide Ruth, and Ruth will get married, and she will have a son, who will have a son, who will have a son. Her great grandson is this guy named David.
The David?
The David. David is the offspring of a conversion. That's why we say the Messiah will be the son of a Jew by choice. Is the myth. So is the story. So that's what Ruth is about. And it's about, how do you deal with your mentor-mentee? How do you deal with your teacher? Okay, these are all important questions. How do you deal with the guru, the Rebbe, and things like that? Okay, what's healthy, what's not healthy? And how do you know a legitimate person is a teacher or a mentor? How do you know that someone's a fraud, so to speak? Okay, shouldn't be there. So Ruth goes into that. Then you have a book called, the next book called Psalms. Psalms, which is written by King David, most of them. Psalms goes into all of the feelings of humanity, all of the emotions. Joy, fear, pain, love, every emotion like a 2-year-old. There are 150 of them. We're told that you should read all 150 twice a day. The rabbis realized that wasn't happening, so they said if you read up 150 once a day, that'd be fine. They realized that wasn't happening, so over the centuries, if you read the last 5, it counts as if you had read all 150 twice, and it got to the point where even if you just read the last one, Psalm 150, you get the credit. The word for Psalms is Tehillim. It comes from the word that means praise, Hallel. Okay, and many of these songs or psalms which were sung are Hallel le Yah, praise to Yah, to God, or Hallelujah. That's where it comes from. Okay, it didn't come from the Baptists; it came from us. And in this, we have all sorts of feelings. It's all about emotions and feelings and faith in God, and how to look to God for when you're despairing, when you're feeling guilty, when you're feeling happy, when you're feeling scared. All the feelings that David felt, because David really was a passionate. There's frustration. There's everything, and there's answers. A sign now, I lift mine eyes to the mountains. From where does my help come? My help comes from God, who is creating the heavens and the earth. What are your most funerals? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures, right? It's consolation. Amazing, amazing words. There's stories that, I think I shared this last week, that there's one story that David put his 22-string harp on the window, and when the wind blew, it played the music, and then he had every one of the 22 strings relate to a different letter, and so he wrote it out, and that's where the Psalms came from. Another one, which is much more likely, is that when he was a warrior and he was singing with his harp, and then when he became king, guys would say, "Hey, Dave, sing that song we used to sing." Well, now he's king, and so it's being recorded. I have not seen it. Orlando, you've seen it, I think, because you told Stan about it. This new show, House of David.
Yes.
How is it?
It's great. It shows.
Have you seen it?
Just one.
Is it only 3, or is it going to keep going?
No, so right now there are 3 episodes, and every Thursday the episode 4 is coming.
Where does it show?
Amazon Prime. So if you have
I
pay
do
for
have
Amazon,
Amazon.
you will be able to watch.
Is it a Amazon offered program?
Yeah.
Yes, it's
So I can go back to the first episode now.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah. So
It shows basically the first episode. It starts when he is fighting with Goliath, and then how he became since he born
how he got to that place.
got to that place to be a king. So
It's look, the only thing that Stan told me,
It's training.
it's just training.
but Stan said that it calls him a bastard son, which is not true. But
Yes, so it's like it is a TV show. So.
Yeah. And there's a great book by Jonathan Kirsch about King David as a human being. It's a fabulous, fabulous book. King David was this amazing human being on so many levels, and he was human. That's the great thing, is he was not. What I love about our role models is that they're human. I can relate to them. They do great things, but they also screw up. I'm more comfortable with that than I am with the Buddha or the Jesus kind of role model. I can't relate to that in the same way. David did great things and he screwed up. Abraham did great things and he screwed up. So Psalms is very, very powerful. We then have this amazing book called Job or Job. Job, so this and this is emotions. How to find God and not find, how to experience God in the midst of our passionate emotions, whether they're fear or guilt or anger, whatever they are. Job is about how to find God in the midst of suffering. There's a lot of questions in the Talmud about who actually wrote Job. Some say Moses, some say different people. But Job is really this amazing piece of work because it's about suffering, which leads to faith. Do you know what I mean by that? If you walked in and saw Orlando screaming at some young man to get his push-ups, you might say, and is screaming and swearing at him, you might say Orlando was very abusive. But if you knew that Orlando loved the young man and was asked to coach him and help him get stronger, you'd say he's a good coach, right? Okay. There's a difference between suffering and pain. Pain, you know why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. Suffering, you don't know. And that leads to faith. And so Job is this story that everything is taken away from him. There's an old movie called Joshua Then and Now with a very young, I think James Woods, if I recall right. I think it's James Woods. See the James Woods or Richard Dreyfuss. I think it's James Woods. And I think Alan Arkin is his father. And he explains the book of Job. He says, look, God and the devil, they make a bet. They make book on Job. God says he's going to stay righteous. The devil says he's not, and they make some book on it. And so they start having these bets. And the devil, he tries to throw some curveballs, something to that effect. First of all, it's not the devil. We don't believe in a devil. Hasatan, the angel who puts obstacles in our ways, it's the only time he's mentioned in the Hebrew scriptures. And he is constantly can take everything away except for Job's life, and he does. And Job never knows why. Here's a really magical secret about Job, though. In the beginning of Job, he has all of the symbology of the universe. Well, when we study mysticism, we'll call the tree of life. But he only has half of it. Okay? When, at the end, when he gets everything back, he actually has the full tree of life. So when he's younger, before he suffers, he only understands God in the happy, the easy, the joy. By the end, he understands God in the joy and the pain and how it all leads to a more whole place. Very powerful book, very much about faith, very much about suffering leading to faith, because that's really what it can lead to. The next book after that is called Mishlei, Proverbs. This is written by King Solomon, and it's in his middle age. And it's really about experiencing God in the workplace. How do you experience God in society, in the community, in the workplace? It's easy to start working, get so lost in the work, you forget why you're working in the first place, right? It's an easy thing to do, which is why the last chapter of the book of Proverbs is called Eshet Chayil. Traditionally, we read it to our wives on Shabbat, and it is about a woman of valor, her values beyond rubies and pearls, and it's about everything like that. And the reason is because after going through how you experience God in the workplace, it's a reminder. It's about your partner. It's about your wife. It's about your children. It's why we do what we do. And all too often, it's easy to forget that. So, the opposite, I guess, of Proverbs would be Cats in the Cradle as a song. The father who forgets why he does what he does. Because he's so concerned, I don't have time for you, I'm working.
I have a quick question, because I'm a little confused about the relationship. I thought, is Solomon David's son, or?
Solomon is David's son, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Solomon builds the temple. Remember, I said 2/3 of this book is about temple, or David or Solomon, or about them.
The first time.
Yes, the first temple. So, and rebuilding the second. Prophecies are rebuilding the second. It's all about the temple theology. So, in Proverbs, it's very much about Proverbs. This is how you should work in the business world. This is how you should work with other people. And the ending part about this is how you should interact with your family. Okay? So, the book after that is this wonderful book called Song of Songs. This too is written by Solomon, but when he's very young. Now, a young man, let's say 20 years old, often where does he find God? In sex, making love, right?
Yeah.
So let's just be honest, right? That's why they're yelling, "Oh God, oh God, oh God," right? I used to tell students at Loyola that if you read Song of Songs, a literal translation to your date, and she didn't go home with you, she ain't never going to. Okay? It is extremely intimate, and it is a double entendre. It is both about the relationship between a man and a woman, and it's about the intimate relationship between God and the people of Israel. If you look at any description of the mystical experience by in any tradition throughout the ages, the language that is constantly used, whether it's Kabir or Gibran or Rumi, is a language of love, because there is no other language that can describe the full intimacy that we have with God and being aware of that. What we call Yehud, or unification. It's just nothing, there's no other words. And it's true, to love another person is to see the face of God. And it's a Song of Songs is about that intimate relationship between the people of Israel and God. In most Bibles, you do not read a literal translation. You read what is called Rashi's allegorical translation, which takes all the intimacy out, but just talks about Israel and God. To give you an idea, this would so flip out Kirsty to give you an idea of, okay, this is literally this is a literal translation. How beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of an artist. Your navel is like a round goblet that never lacks splendid wine. Your belly is like a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Your two breasts are like fawns, twins of a gazelle. May your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and the roof of your mouth like the best wine for my beloved, that goes down sweetly, causing the sleeper's lips to murmur, I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the field. That's pretty, that ain't G-rated. Okay? And it really does, it really does go through that in so many different ways. And
Then how does that relate to Israel and God?
Because our relationship with God is extremely intimate as a people. We are the chosen people in that way. Not that we're better than others. That's not what the chosen people mean. It means, I am not better than any other husband, but I am Allison's choice. Okay? That doesn't mean that there aren't better men, or everyone's different. God chooses us, and where does he betroth us? Passover. Marries us on Shavuot. Okay, but Passover is the betrothing. And that's why we read Song of Songs at Passover. It's also what was read when the temple, the first day when they dedicated the temple, they read Song of Songs. King Solomon read Song of Songs. And it's about the intimacy of the relationship, of the potential that we just need to be aware of with our spouse, our partners, and with God. Does that help a little bit to understand? It's about our relationship,
Sure.
and the intimacy and beauty of that relationship. So that's Song of Songs. After Song of Songs, we have this other book, next book, which is called Echa, which literally means how, and it's what we call in English Lamentations. And it's a double entendre. It is both how and how. It talks about, it's attributed by many to either Jeremiah or his scribe, and Lamentations talks about this is what we did and this is why the temple was destroyed. So Lamentations, Echa, is all about finding God in pain, in the relationship when we are in the relationship of pain. Not suffering. But, you know, we screwed up. I screwed up. I feel guilty. I feel bad. I hate the punishment I'm getting. Where is God in this? That's Echa. That's Lamentations. Now we start getting into some very, very, and we read that on Tisha B'Av. Now we get into some, what is arguably the single most difficult book in the Bible. And it's not even all in biblical Hebrew. It's the book Daniel, which is filled with prophecies. And it's about time and timelessness. So, time is an artificial construct. It does not exist. Time is an artificial construct. It is based upon space and distance, and it is based upon relationship. A moment in your beloved's arms may feel like a century. A moment listening to a rabbi pontificate may feel like 3 hours. Right? I mean, how many times we look at our watch? God, it's only been 10 minutes and he's still talking. Right? And just shut up. Right? There was a rabbi, I will remain nameless, and you know, so I make it a very clear point on Rosh Hashanah. I'm done at 1 o'clock. I will finish by 1 o'clock within 5 minutes, one way or the other, because I know people have lunch plans. Yom Kippur, I don't care so much. They better not have lunch plans. But Rosh Hashanah, I'm done at 1 o'clock. Okay. There was a guy, he's no longer here. I'm still not going to say his name, but who used to be here in the area, and he would have people there. He normally never had people, right? So he'd have all these people there. His Rosh Hashanah services would finish at 2:30, 3 o'clock. Not because the service was so long, but because he gave an hour and 20-minute sermon. I am convinced there is not a human being on the planet who wants to hear me give a sermon on Rosh Hashanah for an hour and a half.
Well, he held it in for a year. I mean, that's why it took so long.
Right? People say, how long does it take when you officiate a wedding? I say, well, it depends on what you choose for your rituals, but I don't pontificate, because I guarantee you there's not a person at a wedding or funeral who's there to hear the rabbi give a Torah teaching. Not one. They're there for the wedding, they want to party. They're there for the funeral, they want to get out. So time is a relative statement, is the point, right? A washed pot never boils, because time is relative. Daniel, because of its prophecies, and it is so confusing in terms of how it's structured, is all about finding God in the relationship with time and timelessness. I don't view myself as an elder. I just don't. But I have to recognize I am. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not how I view myself. I remember an old friend saying, turn around looking for the elders. He's native. Turn around looking for the elders, and all of a sudden we realize we be they.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's us.
Right. I don't. You're right. Our children, all of a sudden, boom, they grow up. So time is all about relationship, right? I can speak with total authority on this. A golf match it's the same 4.5 hours, give or take. And sometimes that's such a fast 4.5 hours. And other times, oh my God, when will it end?
3 days.
Okay. So Daniel's about finding God in that relationship of the construct of time that we have created. Very difficult book. The Book of Esther, which we will be dealing with on this holiday of Purim, is about excess. People so don't get what Esther is about. So I want to tell the story of Esther just because it's so important as we approach Purim. Esther, we're doing a Talmud of Tobacco on Wednesday night about it. Esther is this great book where you've got this young woman named Esther, you got this drunk king named Hashwerosh, a pain in the head. And he's got a minister named Haman. And Ahasuerus, this drunk king, says to his wife Vashti, I want you to go and dance naked for my ministers. And Vashti says, no. He says, you're going to have to dance naked for my ministers or you can't be queen anymore. She says, thank you, bye-bye. And she leaves. So he holds a beauty contest to find who's going to be the new queen. And Mordecai, who is the uncle or godfather or, whatever way he's got a relationship with Esther, like she's his ward, pushes her to go do it. And she wins. The rabbis over the last, especially the Eastern European Orthodox rabbis over the last 500 years, refuse to actually look at the text. They make comments like, oh, she won, but she really wasn't dancing or anything. She actually was a baby and her beauty seduced Ahasuerus. Or she was really, really old. That's a load of BS. The text says what the text says. Okay? And we need to stop being apologetic for it and instead learn to integrate it and how to use it. That's one of the things I really, you get these Orthodox Eastern European guys who are saying, oh, she was so pure. No, she wasn't. She was a woman. She was a young woman. Let's be honest. Mordecai pimped her out. Okay? Let's just be honest about it. He pushed his niece, his ward, to go do a beauty contest, to go be the wife of a drunken king. Mordecai refuses to bow before Haman. A number of other things happen as well. Haman convinces the drunken king that he should kill all of the Hebrews, all the Jews. And he signs this that it's going to happen on a certain date because Haman really hates the fact that Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. So he convinces the drunken king, look, they're not your people, etc. And Mordecai goes to his niece, ward, whatever, Esther, and he says to her, you need to convince the king to not kill the people. And she goes, well, if I go there and I'm not, he hasn't summoned me, he might kill me. And Mordecai says, look, God's going to save the Jewish people one way or the other, and maybe this is why you were put in this position. So she says, ask all the Jews in Shushan, the town, to pray for me. And so they do for 3 days. And then she goes to the king, and the text is very explicit. Now, I want you to understand, in the text of any book in this, any verse in this book, we are taught traditionally there is not a word misplaced. There is not a word that should be there that is not there. There is not a word that is not there that should be there. Okay? So if the text says the rabbi was wearing a white hat and a green sweater, okay, and blue jeans, then it means the rabbi was wearing a white hat, green sweater, and blue jeans. Right? If it says that he's wearing a white hat, a green sweater, blue jeans, and tennis shoes, then it means that he's wearing a white hat, green sweater, blue jeans, and tennis shoes. And if it says he's only wearing a white hat, the rabbi is showing his everything. Okay? His massive biceps, whatever it may be, right? So what happens? And it's worth reading the actual text because people get very offended by this, but I'm sorry, the text says what the text says. And it's important to understand. Plus, Esther's his wife. Can she do anything she wants with her husband? It's okay, right? It's not like she wants to meet him with her husband. She can meet him with her husband. And if she wants to manipulate her husband by being intimate with her husband, is that okay? Absolutely. You're going to tell me your wife never did that? You never did that?
Happens all.
Right? Okay, that's right. So here's what it says, and I'm going to read it very clearly. Esther put on her diadem, her crown, and stood in the presence and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, facing the king's palace, while the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room facing the entrance of the palace. So first of all, he's sitting in his throne. She comes over here and she looks across from him. What is she wearing?
A crown.
The diadem.
What else is she wearing?
Doesn't say.
Will be nothing.
Is that okay? Absolutely. It's a husband. Who cares? We don't need to make apologies for this. Stop taking the text and fitting it into some sort of constraint that is not accurate and not reflective of our brilliance and wisdom and depth of our teaching. So I'm just reading what it says. So now she's standing across. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. The king extended to Esther the golden scepter which he had in his hand. And Esther approached and touched this tip of the scepter. What troubles you, Queen Esther? The king asked her, what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be granted you. So let's be clear about this. His naked wife shows up with just a crown.
She isn't naked.
All she says is she's wearing a crown. Text says what the text says, right? He says, and he's sitting there and he goes, humana, humana, humana. And he extends a scepter that happens to be in his hand. He extends it to her. She gets on her knees and she touches it. And he says, Esther, baby, whatever you want, I'll give you half the kingdom. You think it was a real golden scepter? Or do you think maybe that's a euphemism?
But then we're twisting the word.
No, we often use euphemisms. We don't twist words, but they're often euphemisms. What it says,
Not a scepter.
when it says that God gets angry, it never says God gets angry in the Torah. Never. See, your phone agreed. Never says that. What it does say is that God's nostrils flared. God doesn't have an actual nostrils, but it says that because it's passionate. It's not about angry. It's about he gets passionate when our nostrils flare. Maybe it's a scepter. Maybe it's a scepter made out of metal and gold. Maybe it's a scepter of another type. But the bottom line is he extends the scepter. She touches it. And he goes, hey, baby, whatever you want. Text says what the text says. She says, I want to have a party. Just you, me, and Haman. And he goes, whatever you want, baby. If that's what you're into, sure, fine, we'll have a party. That's three of them have a party. And when the king gets up, what happens? The king gets up because he's drunk all the time, so he probably had to relieve himself or something. But he gets up, and she's on a divan, and the exact same language that was used long, long ago in the book of Genesis about Potiphar's wife accusing Joseph of trying to seduce her even when he didn't. Same exact language is used to describe what happens with Esther and Haman. She screams, the drunken king walks in, she says, he tried to rape me, he tried to rape me. It's the same language that is used. It's a recapitulation. That's why we spent the time on the story weeks ago. It is a recapitulation of that story of when Joseph was falsely accused. She falsely accuses Haman. Ahasuerus, for his part, is furious, and he decides he's going to impale Haman. That doesn't mean from the top, that means from the bottom up. Big stick, boom. As well as Haman's 10 sons. Okay? And Mordecai becomes the chief minister, takes Haman's place. And what is the first thing that Mordecai does? He decides that they need to be proactive and attack all of the Persians. And he kills, I forget if it's 65 or 75,000 Persians on the same day that the Jews were going to be killed. And let me find the exact page because I really want to share with you what the exact number. I think it's 65 or 75,000, but I really don't honestly remember. When Mordecai gets in power, he becomes totally enamored with his own power. By the way, most Orthodox congregations in the world, certainly in this country, do not read this when they say they read the Gonzo Megillah, the whole Megillah. They skip this particular part. They don't want to address the fact that this is what Mordecai does.
And Mordecai became a power-hungry guy.
Mordecai goes and destroys all of his foes. He kills, I want to say it's 75,000 Persians that he attacks preemptively. I think it's either 65 or 75,000. I actually don't remember. So he did all this, and Haman dies, and Mordecai is in power, and Esther's the queen. Okay, let's be clear what this story is about. And first, I mean, just a little bit more. It's the holiday. It is this book associated with the holiday of Purim. We are taught that the only holiday that will still be observed in the world to come is the holiday of Purim. That's how powerful and important it is. The secret is found in the name Purim. If I asked you what's the holiest day in the Jewish year, most people would say
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. The
That's
full name of Yom Kippur is Yom HaKippurim, which literally means the day that is like Purim. On Yom Kippur, we go into the very depths of our souls and we cleanse to come out reborn. Every culture in the world, doesn't matter which indigenous culture it is, has a ceremony where they believe that they are collectively cleansing evil for the planet. That holiday for us is Purim. Because what happens in a traditional reading of the Megillah, now understand you're getting drunk the whole time, and we're going to get to why. But what happens in a traditional reading of the Megillah is when Haman and his 10 sons are impaled, the cantor has to sing it all in one breath. There are 22 words, there are 10 sons. There are 22 pathways and 10 points in our Jewish mystical tradition of the tree of life. So our Makabbalim, what we've learned and what we're taught is that on that moment, from the darkness of his drunkenness, the cantor, who is the shaliach, the messenger for all of us, chants out all 10 points, all 22 pathways, cleanses the world of the tree of knots to make a tree of life. In that moment, we believe we are literally cleansing.
Cleanses out the tree
of knots, the dark tree,
okay.
to make a tree of life.
Knots.
And it's pretty powerful. That's what this holiday is about. Because see, everyone, and we're supposed to get so drunk you can't tell between the blessings of Mordecai and the curses of Haman, which have the same numerical value, the two phrases. You're not supposed to be able to tell between day and night. You're supposed to be that excessive. Why? Everyone in this book is excessive, addictive, and a drunk. Whether they are drunk on alcohol like Ahasuerus, power like Haman and Mordecai, or sex and beauty like Esther. Everyone is excessive. And in this book, it is a book about addiction recovery, because that's what addiction is. It's excess without boundary. When you are fighting Amalek, when you are fighting evil, when you're fighting cancer, when you're fighting an addiction, you don't negotiate with it. You cut it out. So where do we see a positive role model? This is, by the way, is the only book where God's name is not mentioned in the entire Bible. His name is never mentioned. So where do you find God when God is seemingly absent? When everyone around you is drunk, when everyone around you is excessive. You find it in the very first part of the book. Vashti. You walk away. You don't negotiate with an addiction. You cut it out and you walk away. You don't negotiate with Hamas. You cut it out. You walk away. You don't negotiate with Amalek, Haman is supposedly descended from Amalek. You walk away. You destroy and walk away. You don't negotiate with it. You can't give an alcoholic one drink or a heroin addict one snort. Right? Can't do it. You cut it out. You walk away. And so Vashti is the heroine of this story. Everyone else is a negative role model because they're all excessive drunks on one way or another. So you got to be willing to go into it and step away from it totally. And that's why it's such a powerful holiday and such a powerful book.
So is Vashti the righteous one in the whole story?
Mm-hmm. If you read the text, Vashti is the righteous one. That's why Hera Peter Stowe also said she was the first feminist, the first women's rights person. If you listen to 98+% of Eastern European Orthodoxy today, they will tell you, oh no, she was horrible. And Esther's this wonderful model, this virginal savior. That's not what the text says. Okay, the text says what it says.
She's a liar too, on top of it.
The text says what it says. So the simple answer is Vashti says no when she's asked to dance naked. She just won't play the game. And if you're in that place of excess, you don't play the game. That's why Purim is such a powerful holiday, so important in so many ways. It is a lesson on how we deal with excess, whether it's excess of drugs, alcohol, addictions to money, to power, to fame, whatever it may be, whether it's Amalek and Hamas or Haman.
There can
Just
be,
walk away from it.
You do not negotiate with evil. You do not negotiate with excess. You cut it out and you move on.
there's excess in the name of God too, as practiced by the current Muslim.
As practiced by many people
Yeah.
in different faith traditions. The point, and that's why it's the one holiday that we are taught will still be observed in the world to come, because even in the world to come, you could be excessive. You could be excessive. You know, I'm closer to God. I follow His commandments better than you do. I had this conversation with someone yesterday about a funeral. They said, "Can I do this? I really don't want to do this at the funeral." I said, "There's no mitzvah, please. You're not going to hell because you don't do it. We don't have that theology." The Book of Esther is so powerful. The holiday of Purim is so powerful. And it is an answer to what is going on with Hamas and with evil. It is an answer to addictions. It is an answer of any sort that includes power, fame, substance. It's all found in the Book of Esther.
So is this negotiation, and politics often fall under these categories of excess. And so the negotiation with Putin, is that anything like?
I kind of stay away from
excess?
politics as much as I can.
Yeah,
Here's what I will say. Last night, some people won a best documentary for film that was a piece of fiction.
Mhm.
yeah, I heard.
And they got up and they did. Orlando, you can find it. I wrote an article that I think was published about an hour ago on PJ Media. And they got up and they talked about their political views, and they castigated Israel and the United States as blocking for peace, and how all they want is peace, etc. It's all this BS. Okay. Now, I'm going to go under the assumption that when these filmmakers originally started making the film, maybe that's what they wanted, was to create something that would bring people together. But they started making that long before October 7th. They didn't release it till after. They didn't finish it till after October 7th. And they got up and they talked about all this stuff. And the Arab was saying, if only my people were treated well. All we want is peace. We never want anything else. It's BS. And the Israelis saying, if it wasn't for America that's blocking peace, we could have peace, and my friend's family, and we all just want to, we all want to honor all this. Okay. I'll even go under the assumption that they believe that. And I don't think they do, personally. But I'll go under the assumption that they believe it. Here's what they didn't talk about. One of their close friends who had been involved in the development of the film in the very beginning of it was a guy named Chaim Katzman, blessed memory, who was killed in a kibbutz on October 7th. Now, if they really wanted to talk about peace, and they could have gotten up and said, our friend Chaim, who worked on this with us, was killed on October 7th, and that was not okay. And we need to both listen to each other and bring peace. There's a lot of things they could have done, but they have totally fallen into the excess of, they want a U.S. distributor because they haven't gotten one in a year. They want the fame, the money, etc. And they got a standing ovation at the Oscars. So it's easy to fall into the excess. And Mordecai was a good guy, right? But when he becomes in power, he too, power corrupts absolutely. So when you view it that way, it becomes an understanding of what to do around excess. And that's why it's such an important and powerful book. Okay? All right. After Esther, we have then two other things. We have, originally they were separate books. They're combined. Sometimes they're separate. But we have Ezra and Nehemiah. So Ezra and Nehemiah take place after, I'm just going to put all, and see why I see that. Bring it all. Ezra and Nehemiah take place when we are in Babylon. And they convince the king to allow us to go rebuild the temple. Ezra is considered the second lawgiver, like Moses. Those who are academics who believe that the Torah was written by 4 different authors along with a redactor, by the author who's concerned with Yahweh, called God Yahweh, the author who called God Elohim, the author who was concerned with the priestly, the Levites, the author who was concerned, J.E.P., the Deuteronomist, who wrote the book of Deuteronomy, and then someone who tied it all together. If that is the case, it is accepted that that person who tied it all together was Ezra. Ezra was the spiritual leader of the people, bringing them back to the temple. Nehemiah was his, and it's pronounced Nehemiah all the time. It's actually Nehemiah, but he was the one who physically said, "This is how we rebuild the temple." And the laws that we are prohibited from doing on Shabbat. In the Torah, it says you shall remember and protect the Shabbat. It doesn't say you can't do this. It doesn't say that in the Torah. It's oral tradition. And where we get our tradition from are all based upon the laws that are forbidden when Ezra and Nehemiah rebuilt the temple. That's why you're not supposed to strike fire and things like that, because it's all forbidden on the Shabbat by Ezra and Nehemiah. So what is it about? If we look at this book as temple theology, about the building of a second temple, it's all about David, Solomon, the temple, right? Then Ezra and Nehemiah, and Nehemiah is one of my favorite characters. He just is this amazing character. And when he has speeches to the king, the king thinks he's talking to him, but he's actually talking to the King of Kings, right? Ezra and Nehemiah both do that. When you experience God in every possible relationship, with your parents, your mentor, your teachers, and all of your emotions and suffering, in the workplace, in intimacy, in pain, in timelessness, even in excess when God is seemingly absent, the only thing you can do is serve. Got children? Do they have any idea how much you love them?
I hope so.
Do they really, unless they're parents themselves, can they really know how much you love them?
Not really.
Right? When we can experience God in all the facets of relationship, then we are able to understand that the only choice we have is to serve God in life. That's what Ezra and Nehemiah do, and that's the building of the temple. Then you have, at the very end, you have something called Chronicles, which is basically just a recapitulation of the entire Bible. Okay? Just reminding us what the whole history was. So that's why this is called Sacred Relationships, because all of it is about finding God within different types of relationships. That's what Ketuvim really is about. And I believe that's the thread that the Talmud talks about. But based upon that, I could read any verse and you would know if it's about pain, it's from Lamentations. If it's about suffering, it's from Job. If it's about intimacy, it's about from Song of Songs. It's about the workplace. It's about Proverbs, right? If I just open up and I just turn and let me just find something to read here. And I read
Need something random.
just randomly read, right? Drink water from your own cistern and flowing water from your own well. Then your springs will spread outward, streams of water in the thoroughfares. They will be yours alone, strangers not sharing them with you. Your source will be blessed, and you will rejoice with the wife of your youth. A beloved hinds inspiring favor, her breasts will sate you at all times. You will always be intoxicated with her love. Why then, my son, Should you err with it? And it's all about how you deal with women and the world in a practical level. Okay, so it's Proverbs, right? It surely wisdom will call out and understanding will raise her voice. Listen to me. Hearken with discipline and grow wise, and you will not reject wisdom. Praiseworthy is the person who listens to me, to hasten to my doors every day, to guard the guard posts of my entrances. That's about finding God within the marketplace, within the working environment, within in that kind of thing. If we start talking about let's just find something really. So if I start reading to you, open your heart to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfection. Admit me, and my head is filled with dew-like memories of Abraham. Spurn me, and I bear collections of punishing rain and exile nights. I've doffed my robe of devotion. How can I don it? I've washed my feet, the trod your path. It's very intimate. Song of Songs.
So are they bringing together the entire Ketuvim or the entire Bible? You said the entire.
The Chronicles, they bring
Yeah.
the entire Bible together.
The entire.
Yeah, Chronicles actually. Chronicles starts, and again, one of the reasons to understand what the Bible, that we have the whole creation part, is it means that when God gave us Israel, it was His to give, right? So, the very first part is the whole genealogy of the Davidic dynasty: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalal, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Hun, and Japheth. The sons of Japheth, and it goes on. The sons of Ham, it goes on. The sons of Shem, it goes on. The sons of Abraham, again, it goes through Shem, and then it goes Nahor, Terach, Abram, who is Abraham, the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael. These are their generations, Ishmael's firstborn. The sons of Keturah, Abraham's concubine. Abraham begot Isaac. Sons of Isaac, Esau in Israel. It's literally from the beginning, and it's all about the Davidic dynasty, which is the idea of the temple.
How can the Arabs think of us the way they do when in our Bible it talks about Ishmael too? You know,
Well, they
he's
believe
part of
the
the
Quran.
story.
Okay, that's a different dialogue, which has to do with the Quran itself and the Hadiths. And the Quran, I have more and more just been willing to publicly say it. The Quran is not a book of spirituality at all. It's a book of world domination, guys, under the guise of do what Allah says.
Yeah.
It is considered, it's a syllogism, it considers itself the perfect, complete word of Allah. How do we know that it's perfect and complete? Because it says it is. So when it says it is, how do we know that it's true? Because it says it over here that it is. It's this horrible logic,
Yeah.
and it's not about and it's not about spirituality. It's about conquering the world. When something is dedicated to Allah, it's forever Allah's, and it needs to be reclaimed. So that's why you cannot have peace with Hamas, because the simple answer is they are very clear in their theology that if you're an infidel, which is Jew, Christian, or non-practicing Muslim, you are to be killed, converted, or enslaved. Plain and simple. It's repeated over and over and over. And that any land that's ever been for Allah is Allah, since at one point they controlled Israel. There is no place for anyone other than that. Our mistake is we think that there are moderate Muslims that we may know in our own lives, and that's mainstream Islam, as opposed to Hamas's extremism. The reality is the inverse. What we consider extremism is actually mainstream Islam. And the people we consider moderate are actually considered infidels by their own people.
Yep.
Okay. So, but that's our Bible. That is the Hebrew scriptures. And from front to end. And now it's the one talk on Ketuvim to really understand the power of these books.
So from now on, it's Purim. That's the main
Right?
one.
Purim's, well, they're all main ones.
Yeah.
Passover, they're all main ones. If I want to experience the intimacy with God, Song of Songs. If I want to experience, you're losing track because you're so geared towards whatever your goal is in business, your new project, your new whatever. Then you read Proverbs. I skipped one. I actually did skip one. I'm sorry. Did I skip it? I did skip it. How did I skip it?
Well,
No. After Proverbs is Ecclesiastes. Did I skip it? I did. I blew that. Over here is Ecclesiastes. We're called Kohelet. And it's written by Solomon as an old man. And it is all about finding God in everything and everywhere. So Ecclesiastes is often misinterpreted because people read English translations. So it's often misinterpreted as a sense of futility. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. If you just sometimes translate as futility of futilities, all is futility. There's nothing new under the sun. Right? These are all quotes from Ecclesiastes from Kohelet. It's not. It's not. It's the exact opposite. Kohelet is realizing that everything in the physical world is temporal and temporary, and that which is permanent is spiritual. And the term Hevel Hevelim, the term that is used to me, that's generally translated as vanity of vanities, or that is translated as futility of futilities. Hevel is when you're outside and it's cold and you breathe and a mist comes and then dissipates, that's Hevel. That's literally what it is. It's just like a mist of a mist of a mist that evaporates into nothing. And everything in this world is just part of the process. And God is in everything and everywhere. And that's why there's a time to be born and a time to die and a time to plant and a time to sow and all those kind of things. He writes that as an old man. So as a young man, think about it. Just think about it, from a psychological developmental point of view. As a young man, he experiences God going bada bing, bada boom. As a middle-aged man, he experiences God in the community, in the workplace. As an old man, he sees God in everything and everywhere. So if you're having issues that you want to be more aware of God and everything, you pick up Kohelet. You're feeling scared, angry, guilty, you pick up Psalms. You want to understand, I did this, I feel horrible about it, I'm getting punished, I have pain. Read Lamentations. Okay, if you're saying I'm having pain, I don't know why, read Job. If you're feeling of that monkey on my back, whatever that monkey may be, whatever addiction or whatever, read Esther. Does that make sense? So it's very powerful. I don't like the author particularly.
Really.
It's
Are
okay.
those available on?
Yeah, no, it's Amazon.
I saw
Amazon?
it on Amazon,
Mhm.
but it looked like a much larger book.
No, it was
That's
written.
the way the
This was written so you can read a chapter every time you go to the bathroom.
good bathroom book. Huh?
It's a good bathroom book. So that's where we are with it. And that really takes us through the whole Bible and our history and up to that point. And you see why the Ketuvim are so beautiful and so misunderstood. And no one misunderstands. I'll tell you the people who misunderstand. All the people who can quote them to you. The Christians who have no clue what it's actually saying because they don't know the Hebrew. And the ultra-Orthodox Eastern European Ashkenazi Jews who have they're so influenced by Catholic theology that they're not even aware that they are. So for them, Esther couldn't be a full woman who seduces her husband, right? Because they have this Catholic theology that's become part of theirs, where women are either a virgin or a whore, right? Either the Virgin Mary or the Mary Magdalene. So that's the whole point. And Esther doesn't do anything wrong. She just doesn't. And this holiday is so important. Purim is so important. And it really has the opportunity to heal so many things in ourselves internally, but also for the whole world. So that's...
So next time, then we start on the New Testament, right?
I don't know what that is, but no, we don't. Lots of Talmud and other things. Okay?
I know.
So we take it from there, and thank you. And Orlando, I'm going to ask a favor. Can you parse out Esther and Purim? We're off right now, right?
Hold on.
Can you